Recently, I came across a video from psychologist Dr. Orion Taraban. On YouTube, his channel is called Psych Hacks, Better Living with Psychology. It's either that or Better Living Through Psychology, but I think it's Better Living with Psychology. And the video that I'm referencing is one called How to Save Your Mind. And he talked about how it's understood that the human brain does not fully mature until about the age of 25. And that during this time of maturity that we go through, we are basically fed a bunch of bullshit. Those are his words. I would say the same thing, but I also often reference what I call a global brainwashing agenda. And I also concur with much of what he said because it aligns with experiences in my life, which is why I've been binge listening to his talks. And something very particular about that talk stuck out to me, which was when he said that at about age 30 is when people should start, if they realize, if they're lucky, to begin to unravel and basically deprogram themselves from all the nonsense that they've accumulated in that 25 years of cognitive maturation. And, when their brain becomes mature. And I talked about how I had an experience when I was 27 years old when I enrolled in the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, when I volunteered to be hypnotized in front of the class. And when I was counted out of the hypnotic state, I realized that I had mostly been living my life in highly suggestible hypnotic states, and that it was time for me to start living more aware and awake. And it's taken me a long time. I'm still digging out of a lot of things that I accumulated over that time. But that's not the only thing that really stuck out to me. I mean, the thing is that I'm resonating really well with a lot of what he says. I even made a comment about how I said that the talk was brilliant, and it basically summarizes the work that I do as a clinical hypnotist. At that time, in November of 2004, when I started, that's 24 years ago, and when I graduated in 2006 from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute and started practicing, that's basically what we do, is we help people to identify all of the programming that leads to behaviors that result in unwanted results, and we help them to replace them with more favorable thoughts that will help them to consistently achieve the results that they desire. And I gave a little prescription for that, which is a hypnotic technique using a pattern interrupt, where when you find yourself drifting off, like in highway hypnosis, where you start at your starting point, that you're getting in your car, starting engine, but then you get to where you're going, and that's the other time that you're really fully aware, and everything in between is basically a trance state. You're on autopilot. And the other states are, when you are ruminating about some bad thing, just brooding about somebody that insulted you or cut you off or something, or whether you're daydreaming or fantasizing about someone you really like. And the point is that sometimes when we get caught up in those things, we're not really doing anything beneficial. We're just kind of hardwiring more and more this kind of loop of something that really is not necessarily useful. Now, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here and say why it's important to address these states is because, yeah, it's fine to think about somebody that you like and, or even remember something that you didn't like, but to continue over and over and over again, it's one of these little things in our lives that we can do to really actually direct our minds and our consciousness to learning and awareness that would benefit us much more and heighten our intelligence, even make better neuronal connections. There's something called neuroplasticity where we grow more brain cells. There's just so many other ways that you can redirect your attention. And again, I'm not saying that thinking about somebody pleasurable or even that highway hypnosis is that bad. I mean, we have these mechanisms. They help us. We go on autopilot when we're driving, especially when we've been back and forth from a destination over and over again, and our minds tend to wander on other things. What I'm really saying is that it's not that we can't wander, it's that what are we wandering through? And that's the really important part, because the wandering and what we're wandering through are experiences. And it's well documented in various different fields that our minds cannot tell the difference between things that we directly experience and things that we imagine, or things that we observe from. So things that we imagine and observe have various different effects. So what I mean is, to make this clear, when we experience something, and let me line it up with, for example, something that is pretty much every day that we do. So if we are eating a snack, let's say we are munching on a 5-ounce bag that has triple washed baby kale, baby chard, and baby spinach in it. And when we're doing that, certain motor neurons are in action to make our muscles move so that we can do that. We can activate that process of eating. Now, if we were to see somebody else doing that, then the same motor neurons would fire in the same exact order as if we were doing it, like when we were eating it before ourselves. And also, when we imagine that we were doing it, the same motor neurons fire in the same order as if we were doing it. And so, two validations of this point are from something research in mirror neurons that show and demonstrate that when we observe others doing something, the same nerves fire, but what I call at a subactivation level. I call it neural subactivation. I later learned, after I came up with that term, that neuroscientists have already called it subthreshold activation. And then there's a study that was done with Olympic athletes as well called visual motor behavior rehearsal that's also found that when we imagine things, the same nerves fire in the same order as if we were physically doing it. But just at a level that is not causing the nerves to fire. And then also another field that I observed it happening, because I'm a lucid dreamer, and then I also realized that there's a mechanism that operates when we're dreaming that suppresses our motor neuron functioning in a similar way to subthreshold activation, or what I call neural subactivation, so that we don't act out our dreams. Now, in some people, either in disorders or just certain states, like for me, sometimes as a lucid dreamer, sometimes the mechanism gets a little wonky and we tend to kick or speak or do other things in the dream, and in extreme cases, people sleepwalk. And actually, what's really coincidental about that is that I could be considered a somnambulist in the language of hypnosis, from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. A somnambulist it's the Latin for sleepwalker, and what that really means is what I realized when I participated in class to help the instructor demonstrate a basic hypnotic induction. I realized that because of the fact that I've been living most of my life in this hypnotic state, this highly suggestible state, that would be considered a somnambulist, because I was just in or under the influence of my environment so much more often than not, that I was basically sleepwalking in a way. Hypnosis is not really sleep, even though the word hypnosis comes from the Greek god of sleep, hypnosis, because it resembles sleep, but it's not the same thing. And so, but I realized that you could take control of that and turn it into a superpower. And because it helps you to learn really quickly. If it's used in the right way, as long as you know how to direct what you're thinking about. As I was saying, what are you wandering through? And so it's not necessarily a bad thing to have. It's definitely not. The trance states that we go into generally are neutral, right? They're a natural part of how our human mind brain complex operates. But the problem is that we are generally not instructed on how influential these states can be on our behavior and our lives overall. And again, I claim, the conspiracy theorist part of me suspects that it's part of what I call the global brainwashing agenda. That we're not really taught this key thing about our minds. And so we operate by default. And if our default mode is on in various environments, if we don't have a really good upbringing, or we're just in an environment that doesn't really have a lot of great role models or ways for us to succeed in various different ways, then we're going to be operating by that. And this is the bullshit that Dr. Taraban is talking about, and what I experience and what I know. And so it is our duty, once we learn these things, like he was saying, by the time you turn 30, to start reprogramming ourselves with things that are going to be more appropriately suited for us to achieve the results that we desire in life, more often than not. And so this is really the key. And again, I had a pattern interrupt where I would just ask myself the question. I've started doing this, where I would say, what do I really want to be thinking about? Or I would say something, or I'd ask myself a question like, what can I be thinking about that would help me to achieve the results I desire? Or what can I be thinking about that will help me to achieve my goals? Different variations on that. But if we just stick with one, what would I rather be thinking about right now? And I know that's a little bit vague to say, what would I rather be? Because sometimes you think you would rather be thinking about that wonderful person, or something else that may not be as productive. And again, I need to stress, it's not that thinking about somebody and liking someone, or thinking that you're falling in love with them, is necessarily a bad thing. Although I think that falling in love these days, from my experience now, is stupid, and we need to position ourselves in a different way and think about it. But what I'm saying is that, that's fine. Have those thoughts, think about a person, but we should be more aware of it, and then, move on to something more productive, because the time that we spend in our minds doing certain things has really, really powerful effects on our lives overall. The effects are exponential. The things that we think and the things that we say really, really are. It seems like what we're thinking is such a small, tiny thing in our minds that no one else can see. But when it comes out of our mouths, it's even more amplified than it was in our thoughts. And then when we behave and act in certain ways, it's even more amplified. Our lives in the physical world are extremely potently influenced by what we think and all those thoughts that we have in our minds, all that bullshit that Dr. Taraban is saying that we pile on ourselves, and we're really not individuals because of it. We're automatons. We're acting on, and I often talk about how, a variation on the idea that there's nothing new under the sun. And I often say that, a lot of the stuff that I talk about is derivative. It's derived or based on other things that I've experienced in my life. But because I had that experience, realizing that I was a somnambulist, I realized that all I had to do was filter and direct and focus on the things that were going to benefit me and others more than just living by default. So that's the one key thing there, and just stopping and asking the question, what would I rather be thinking about, or what can I be thinking about that will help me to achieve the results I desire? And then I had a pre-scripted answer to that would then help me to branch out and think of various different ways to proceed. Like, it would be something like, how can I attract, subscribe, and retain 1,000 podcast subscribers every month at $30 a month to earn $30,000 a month, right? Something like that. And then you can start to brainstorm about all the different ways that you can possibly make that happen, right? But you have to create something in the place of just that daydreaming, fantasizing, brooding, reminiscing, drifting void that has so much potential for learning and creativity. So now there's a different aspect of this that's really powerful, because what I actually realized was just how much in alignment I've been thinking in another way that I talk about very often that really aligns with this idea that Dr. Taraban is talking about. And it's how often I make this same pretty much parallel commentary about nutrition. And it's actually much more simple than everything that I've said, but I'm just fleshing this out, putting this on record. And, next time I talk about this, it's going to be much more succinct, but this is really the kicker here. And I've said this over and over again about how many years ago, probably 20 years ago or so, it was around the same time I was a student at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, so almost 25 years ago, there was a book and a DVD companion to it so it was a video series by Dr. Andrew Weil, a physician who works out of Arizona, and it was called 8 Weeks to Optimum Health. And in that book, he talked about a story that was related to him by another physician about this river that a paper company set up shop on the banks of it, started polluting it, and all of the life in, on, and around the river either died or stopped, frequenting the river. So of course, everything in and on it died because of the poison from the river, but animals couldn't drink anymore, so they left the area. But then when the paper company had to leave for whatever reason, without any other human intervention, everything came back to life. All of the plants, animals living in, on, and around the river came back. The river's life. And so the analogy is the same thing with the human body. And even Dr. John Kappas, who founded the Hypnosis Motivation Institute that I was going to, had something that he talked about, a hypoglycemic diet, that when you have low blood sugar, a lot of times a whole suite of symptoms can happen, and you become hypersuggestible and develop fears and phobias, and all kinds of things can happen from this state. So he also had an 8-week protocol for resetting your body so that you don't have the low blood sugar issues anymore. And then there was a psychiatrist named Peter R. Bregan, who had a book called Your Drug May Be Your Problem, that had a similar protocol for withdrawing from toxic medications, and on and on. There was a lot of work being done about removing things. And I wrote an article called Becoming Superhuman Through Toxin Elimination and Nutrition. And then I developed a protocol called FAST, Food Awareness Subjective Testing, and another one called FEAST, Food Express Awareness Subjective Testing. And the whole premise was the same thing as the river story, is that if you want to heal and be better, you don't need to start adding things like pills and supplements and surgeries and injections and all these things like that. You simply have to stop poisoning the river of your body, your bloodstream, your digestive system. And when you stop doing that, your body has the opportunity to heal. And it's such a simple thing, but many people don't realize that. So it's either that, or people are just too undisciplined or too brainwashed to do anything about it. I mean, I shop for a lot of people, and I just see the crazy amount of nonsense that people are putting in their bodies all the time. And then a lot of these same people, I'm going to venture to guess, just from experience of talking to a lot of people, they're going to complain about how they don't feel good and how they don't look good, and all of these various different things about, their health and their appearance, when the solution is one of simple process of elimination. You know, the stuff that people are consuming are equivalent to, you know, a paper company dumping toxic waste products into it. And it's really there's no complication about it. It's almost difficult to try to complicate it. But this is the similarity of what he's talking about in How to Save Your Brain, and I often talk about how to save your body. And it's the process of elimination. And there's so much proof of this. And, you know, I looked at a video that I had on YouTube. It's 17 years old of me playing capoeira with a guy named Formiga. If you look it up, it's Hakeem, Hakeem, and Formiga, Formiga. In Portuguese, that means ant. And the way that I'm moving in that video, and even the way my body looks in that video, is nearly identical to the way I move and look now. I'm extremely, what people would say, ripped. You know, I've got an 8-pack. I'm 48 years old. And I'm doing backflips and 543 spins and all those moves, kicks and tricks and everything that I was doing. And that video was 17 years ago. So that would put me at 31, if that, you know, I mean, it's, and there are videos older than that of just me doing all of these things. If there's some videos called Capoeira, the beginning, Kappaguerra, which I think are a little bit older, from when I was like in my 20s, doing the same thing. So I'm basically moving the same way that I was when I started doing capoeira 34 years ago, when I was about 15 years old. I know those numbers don't seem to add up. It would say that I was 14, but it's just somewhere around the 33 or 34 years. I started in 1992, and late 1992, so it was probably after my birthday in 92, when I was already 15. And so my point again here is these are some of the similarities. And although I don't seek or need or require validation from anybody, it's just always interesting to see when the ideas that I understand from my experience and from my practice line up with other people. Now, it could be some confirmation bias. I could just be going along with or thinking that Dr. Taraban is correct in what he says because it aligns with what I already believe and understand from my experience. But when, upon further examination, and when you look at things objectively, it's evident that this type of advice and direction is some of the best that you can get when it comes to improving your life in various different ways, whether it be mentally or physically or both. It's really a process of elimination. You know, you've heard before, garbage in, garbage out, right? Or you are what you eat. It's the same thing. And I believe, now that I'm saying this, he even mentioned something similar, that a lot of people, you know, think about what they're putting in their bodies as food, but don't necessarily what's being put in their mind. You know, and I've long understood that this was the case. You know, if you look back, my first website that went online is called Hypno Athletics, Exercising Your Mind. So I was a personal fitness trainer, group fitness instructor, martial arts instructor, and as well as going to the Hypnosis Motivation Institute and graduating from there. And I realized the similarities. It's the same thing. What you input is what you output. And even when I started teaching English overseas, and you learn about the 4 basic language skills, it's the same thing. It's input and output. And it starts, the first basic language skill is listening, and then you start speaking, and then you read, and then you write. And some of them can happen, there's overlap, right? But it's input, output, input, output. Listen, speak, read, write. That's how it works in our minds, in our learning. It's what we put in is what's going to come out of us, or the results that we're going to get. And that's basically it. And that's where these things overlap and parallel, and I'm glad that I have been for so long sharing something that is actually going to pay off for people. I mean, again, I'm 48 years old and I am still doing backflips, and I don't have any pain or injuries in my body. I don't have soreness. I don't have arthritis. I don't have indigestion. I don't have brain fog. I'm not tired all the time. I hardly ever get sore unless I do like extreme workouts. Like sometimes I get kind of manic and I train for like 2 hours at a time, outside at the park in the hot sun. But then I just still keep on going and going. And I have a lot of energy and a lot of vitality. And I prioritize function over form, meaning I am more concerned about how I can play and how my body can serve me as my instrument of expression and recreation. That's the one thing that I have the most control over, is how I feel and what I can do. So the fact that I'm still kicking, running, jumping, flipping, climbing, spinning, crawling, squatting, all of these different things that I can do with my body, and doing it with the same ease that I was doing as a teenager, that is phenomenal. I mean, it's proof of the fact that I've been doing something very correct with my nutrition and my movement for most of my life. And this is significant. And this is something that I can share with a lot of people. It has a lot of value. It is extremely valuable because, as I noted before, how a lot of people complain about how they feel and how they look. And I understand that a lot of it has to do with programming, and some of it's misunderstanding, and some of it is a lack of discipline. And what I realized as a clinical hypnotist, the more that I continue to put these messages out there, as well as with evidence. I have videos of me. One of the most recent is me out by this Dairy Queen in Virginia Beach on 17th Street and Atlantic, of doing kicks and spins and backflips on the concrete, with ease. And this is, I do various different sets of these things every single day with no issues whatsoever. I mean, and I know that, people always think about aging and you're supposed to slow down, but I've proven that it's more about how you treat your body over time and the compounding effects of what you're doing, rather than simply the chronological aging. And again, it's the same thing with the river. What really is happening with a lot of people as they slow down is because it's the compound effect of their habits over time, not just time by itself. It's habits multiplied or amplified by time, not time itself. And one final thing I'll say about that, which is really interesting, that is about cellular biology, is a book by a Nobel Prize winner named Christian de Duve. And I recently recalled that his Nobel Prize actually had to do with this very facet of the book that I realized that it's about, which is the lysosomes inside the cells. The cells are all like these mini bodies, right? And lysosomes are destructive bodies. And so the cells have all these different organelles, right? They're like organs we have in our body. The cells have their own organs inside, and lysosomes are one of them. There's lys means destroy or break apart, and some comes from soma, which means body. So these lysosomes are these little bodies inside the cell that destroy things. And what they usually destroy are different kinds of molecules that come into the body that are usually indigestible by the normal metabolic means. And they are helping to save the cell. So these molecules, the lysosomes grab onto them and break them up into, or rearrange them into safer materials that can then be passed out of the body. But every once in a while, the lysosomes cannot do that. They even encounter molecules that are indigestible even by them. And so they just hold on to it to protect the rest of the cells surrounding in the body in general from being toxified by these extremely indigestible or molecules that can't be broken down any further. But what happens if you're continuing to pile on the toxins, what eventually happens is these lysosomes get overloaded and they'll explode, they'll burst. into the cell. It'll kill the cell because of the toxins, and then it will also spread out into the surrounding cells. Some of them will be redistributed into other lysosomes, but other ones will pass through the bloodstream. You might feel nauseous, sick, or have, something that you don't realize why you're slowed down or feel sluggish, and then maybe it'll pass out of the body, or sometimes it just gets redistributed to other lysosomes because it floods the interstitial material between the cells, and so they'll pick it up, try to digest it, but if they can't, they'll just hold on to it. And this is the overall general understanding, is that this is why we need to stop putting in garbage, because it literally actually will destroy our bodies by exploding out of us in all kinds of unhealthy symptoms and ways. And it's like accumulating baggage. And the more baggage you pile on, the more weighted down you are. Of course, if you have more baggage, it's going to be more difficult for you to move, more difficult for you to think, more difficult for you to feel healthy and do all kinds of things. So take it from the wisdom of the lysosomes and all of these different things, the river, and all of the different examples that teach us that the key to our overall healthy living, our longevity, is to reduce toxins. It's not necessarily that we have to add anything. We have to stop poisoning ourselves. And it takes discipline and courage to do that in the face of a world where being normal is so accepted. And so, do you want to be ordinary, or do you want to be extraordinary? It's really your choice, and it always has been. I am Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.